In the glittering, often deceptive world of reality television, there is one question that echoes louder than any on-screen argument, one secret more fiercely guarded than any family drama. How much do they get paid? And for the last decade, no family has sparked this question more than the Browns. Fans have dissected every scene, every purchase, every tearful confession, all trying to answer the million-dollar mystery at the heart of Sisterwives. How much money does TLC really hand over for this front-row seat to the collapse of a plural empire? The official numbers are buried deeper than a Coyote Pass waterline, but the whispers, the leaks, and the on-screen clues are painting a shocking picture. It's a story not just of a paycheck, but of a secret financial war, of unequal paychecks, and a betrayal so deep it may have been the real reason the family imploded. Before we crack open the Brown family's secret financial vault and expose the theories that are tearing the fandom apart, I need you to do me a quick favor. If you love getting the real story behind the headlines and uncovering the secrets the networks don't want you to know, hit that like button right now and make sure you're subscribed to COCO Gossip with the notification bell turned on. You are not going to want to miss a single detail of this deep dive, because what we're about to uncover changes everything you thought you knew about the Browns. Now, let's follow the money. To understand the secret paycheck war, you first have to understand the battlefield. When Sisterwives premiered, the world of reality TV compensation was a bit of a Wild West. But industry standards give us a starting point. A common rule of thumb for ensemble casts like the Browns is that the family receives a paycheck equivalent to roughly 10% of the show's per-episode production budget. In the early days, that budget was estimated to be around $250,000 per episode. Do the math, and you get $25,000 for the entire family per episode. With seasons typically having between 10 to 16 episodes, you're looking at a yearly haul of $250,000 to $400,000. Not bad, right? A comfortable upper-middle-class living for a family of that size. But here's the first critical detail. That money doesn't get divided into 5 equal checks for Kody, Mary, Janelle, Christine, and Robyn. No, according to public records and insider reports, the money flows into a single corporate entity, Kody Brown Family Entertainment, LLC. Think about that. One company, one bank account with one man's name front and center. From the very beginning, the entire financial lifeblood of the family was designed to flow through a central choke point controlled by Kody. This wasn't a partnership of 5 equals. It is structured like a business with a CEO and his employees. A report from a former low-level production assistant, which has circulated on Reddit for years, claimed the setup was a source of tension from day one. This source alleged everything was about the family pot. The wives were told their individual earnings, any side hustles, anything was supposed to go into the pot. But the outflow was never transparent. Kody was the gatekeeper. It wasn't a democracy, it was a monarchy, and he wore the crown. For years, fans just assumed the money from this central pot was distributed fairly. Maybe not perfectly equally, given the different numbers of children, but fairly. The assumption was that the 4 wives were, for all intents and purposes, equal partners in this television venture. They all filmed, they all shared their lives, they all endured the public scrutiny. It seemed logical they would all share in the rewards. But this is where the official narrative begins to crumble, and the betrayal, the great twist in the Sisterwives financial saga, begins to surface. The explosive theory, backed by years of circumstantial evidence, is that there was never an equal split. The theory alleges that from very early on, a secret 2-tiered pay system was established. On one tier, you had Mary, Janelle, and Christine, and on the other higher tier, you had Kody and Robyn. This wasn't just a matter of Kody getting a slightly larger patriarch cut. The whispers from behind the scenes suggest something far more structured and devastating. The theory goes that Kody and Robyn received what amounted to a producer's salary from the LLC, a guaranteed significant payment off the top, before any money was ever distributed to the others. Meanwhile, Mary, Janelle, and Christine were allegedly given what was framed as an allowance or a stipend from the remaining funds. It was a system that fundamentally reclassified their roles. Kody and Robyn were the stars, the business owners. The other 3 were just cast members. They were supporting characters in their own lives. Why would this happen? From a cold corporate network perspective, it almost makes a twisted kind of sense. When the show began, it was about a man and his 3 wives. But the catalyst for the show's long-term success, the narrative engine that drove the drama for a decade, was the arrival of Robyn. She was the new wife, the younger wife. Her integration into the family, her legal marriage to Kody, the birth of their children, the jealousy and tension she created, that became the A-plot. A television network doesn't pay for fairness. It pays for ratings. It pays for drama. And the drama, for better or worse, was increasingly centered around the Kody and Robyn unit. An insider source quoted in a small online entertainment blog claimed, "The network saw Robyn as the key. Kody and Robyn were the ones doing the most press, the ones pitched as the central love story. The belief was that their storyline was what kept people tuning in, so their value to the production was seen as higher." If this is true, it recasts nearly every financial decision we've seen the family make on camera. Suddenly, it's not just about questionable spending, it's about a system of calculated inequality. Let's look at the evidence. The most glaring piece of evidence is, of course, the housing. When the family moved to Flagstaff, they plunged themselves into a financial nightmare. But notice how that nightmare was distributed. Janelle was forced into a cramped apartment, then an RV on a barren plot of land with no water. Mary was shuffled between rentals, often living alone. Christine, too, was in a rental before she bought her own place and fled. But Kody and Robyn, they secured a sprawling 7-figure mansion with enough land for Kody to film his cringy dance videos. The excuse on the show was that they needed the space for their younger children. But the optics were a slap in the face to the other wives and the viewers. That mansion wasn't just a house. It was a symbol. It was a physical manifestation of the financial hierarchy. While Janelle was literally worrying about her pipes freezing in an RV, Robyn was allegedly curating a collection of precious moments figurines in a multi-million-dollar home. How is that possible in a family where all resources are supposedly shared from a central pot for the good of the whole? It's only possible if one part of the family has access to a completely different level of resources. The mansion wasn't a family purchase. It was a Kody and Robyn purchase, likely funded by their premier-tier salaries, while the other wives were left to figure out their housing with their comparatively meager allowances. Then there's the infamous business venture, My Sisterwife's Closet. Pitched as a joint venture for all 4 wives, it quickly became Robyn's passion project, and by all accounts, a financial black hole. On camera, we saw the other wives express skepticism and frustration. Christine, in particular, seemed utterly uninterested, a clear sign that she felt no real ownership over it. Janelle, the practical accountant of the family, often looked deeply uncomfortable during discussions about the business's finances. A report from a fan who claimed to have inside information on a popular Sister Wives forum alleged that the startup capital and the money required to keep the failing business afloat for years didn't come equally from all 4 wives' shares. Instead, it was allegedly drawn from the central Kody Brown Family Entertainment LLC account. This means that Mary, Janelle, and Christine's earnings from the show, money that could have gone to their children, their homes, their own futures, was effectively being siphoned off to fund Robyn's failing jewelry business. It was taxation without representation. They were funding a venture from which they saw little to no return, all while its primary champion lived in a mansion. This theory of a 2-tiered system also explains the explosion of multi-level marketing, or MLM, side hustles among the wives. For years, fans have criticized Mary, Janelle, and Christine for their deep involvement in companies like LuLaRoe and Plexus. It was often seen as tacky or greedy. But what if it wasn't about greed? What if it was about survival? If your primary source of income, the television show you dedicate your life to, is paying you a mere stipend after the CEO and his favorite wife take their massive cut, you'd be desperate for an independent income stream too. Their MLM businesses weren't just about earning extra shopping money. It was a desperate attempt to build their own life rafts as they felt the family ship sinking. They were trying to create financial independence because they knew, deep down, that they had no real power or security within the family's central financial structure. Christine famously needed to raise a $50,000 down payment for her daughter, Mykelti's surgery, and she had to do it by selling clothes online. Think about that. A star of a major reality show for over a decade had to publicly hustle to raise funds for her child's medical care. Where was the family pot? Where was the money from Kody Brown Family Entertainment, LLC? It appears it was tied up, perhaps in a mortgage for a mansion or in unsold sterling silver charms for a website nobody visited. This brings us to the real on-camera incidents, the moments where the mask slipped and the secret war became public. These weren't just fights about money, they were cracks in the dam, revealing the flood of resentment that had been building for years. Remember the infamous Coyote Pass meeting where Kody presented his one big house plan? The tension wasn't just about living together, it was financial. The wives knew that one big house controlled by Kody meant one big budget, also controlled by Kody. It was a plan for permanent financial consolidation under his rule. But the most telling moment, the one that serves as the anchor for this entire theory, came from Janelle. Practical, level-headed Janelle. During a heated discussion about the family's finances and the disastrous Flagstaff move, she looked into the camera, her voice tight with a decade of frustration, and said something that stunned viewers. She talked about how, for years, she had worked and poured her significant salary from her government job into the family pot, trusting it would be managed for the good of everyone. But in return, she felt she had nothing to show for it. She spoke of her financial insecurity, her fear for her children's futures. She said, "I'm seeing my children and I, we're basically homeless." Then came the line that exposed the entire rotten foundation of their financial system. She confessed that if she had been a single woman, she would have been able to provide a far better, more stable life for her children on her own. It was a devastating admission. The entire premise of their plural family was that it provided more security, more support, a stronger foundation. But for Janelle, it had become a financial trap. Her money went in, but she had no control over where it went. She was a shareholder in a company where she had no voting rights, watching the majority shareholders spend her investment on assets she would never own. Mary, too, hinted at this financial disparity. Her storyline for years has been one of isolation and emotional distance. But look at her actions through a financial lens. Her relentless focus on her bed and breakfast, Lizzie's Heritage Inn, was about more than just honoring her ancestors. It was her escape plan. She fought tooth and nail to get the down payment for that inn, and notably, she had to come up with it herself. The family pot was not made available to her. Kody was actively hostile to the idea. Why? Perhaps because it represented a major asset that would be in Mary's name alone. It was a declaration of financial independence, a direct threat to the centralized, Kody-controlled model. Her success with LuLaRoe, reportedly earning a six-figure income at its peak, wasn't just a hobby. It was a war chest. It was the money that gave her the power to finally stand on her own, to rent her own homes, and to live a life separate from the financial ecosystem that had undervalued her for so long. This wasn't just a slow separation of couples, it was the dissolution of a corporation. Christine, Janelle, and Mary weren't just leaving a husband. They were cashing out their shares in a business that had been failing them for years. Christine's decision to sell her portion of Coyote Pass back to Kody and Robyn wasn't just a land deal. It was a final severing of financial ties, a liquidation of her last remaining asset in the Brown family portfolio. The fights we saw on camera about the division of the land were not just about plots and trees. They were about equity. It was a desperate last-ditch attempt by the leaving wives to claw back some of the value they had poured into the family for decades, value they now realized had been funneled disproportionately to benefit the Kody and Robyn power unit. The theory of the secret, unequal paycheck does more than just explain the fancy house and the MLM hustles. It reframes the entire narrative of the show. The breakdown of the Brown family wasn't just caused by a loss of faith or Kody's shifting affections or a lack of communication. Those were the symptoms. The disease, the core infection that rotted the family from the inside out, was money. It was the perceived injustice of a system where 3 women gave their lives, their youth, and their earnings to a collective, only to watch a 4th woman and their shared husband live a life of comparative luxury off the fruits of their labor. The betrayal wasn't Kody falling out of love with them. The betrayal was him, allegedly, devaluing their contribution on a literal balance sheet. Every episode they filmed, every painful secret they shared with the world, was a deposit into an account they couldn't control. They were told it was for the family, but over time they saw that family increasingly meant just Kody, Robyn, and their children. The resentment we saw wasn't just emotional, it was financial. It was the cold, hard anger of a business partner who realizes they've been cheated. The other wives weren't just cast aside emotionally, they were, in a very real sense, the victims of a long-term financial conspiracy within their own family. They were living the consequences of a secret paycheck war, a war they didn't even know they were fighting until it was too late. And as they each began to wake up to this reality, they made the only choice they could. They declared financial independence, which in a family built on a singular pot of money was the same as declaring war. The breakups weren't just the end of marriages, they were a hostile takeover of their own lives. So, if the unequal pay structure is the disease, then Robyn Brown is patient zero. Not because she is inherently malicious, but because her arrival fundamentally altered the business model of the Brown family. Before Robyn, the product TLC was selling was a functioning, if quirky, plural family. After Robyn, the product became the drama of a plural family in crisis. And in television, drama pays a premium. The theory that Kody and Robyn received a larger, separate salary isn't just about greed, it's about perceived market value. They became the sun around which the entire Sisterwife solar system revolved, and the network, allegedly, adjusted the gravitational pull of the money accordingly. Let's dissect the most damning piece of evidence for this financial imbalance: the nanny. The hiring of a full-time nanny by Robyn, a stay-at-home mother, while her sister wives were struggling to manage their own households and careers, was not just a point of contention. It was a brazen display of financial disparity. Kody's infamous sputtering defense on camera, "What does the nanny do?" was a masterclass in deflection. The real question wasn't what the nanny did. It was how they could afford her. In a family supposedly living off one central pot of money, a pot so strained that Janelle was considering life in an RV, how could one household justify the enormous expense of full-time private childcare? The answer is simple. They weren't paying for her out of the same pot as everyone else. The nanny was a luxury afforded by the premier tier salary, the producer's cut that Kody and Robyn allegedly received. It was a business expense for the Kody and Robyn show, while Christine, who had raised 6 children largely on her own, and Janelle, who had worked outside the home for years to support the family, were left to marvel at a luxury they were helping to fund but were never offered themselves. This nanny wasn't just an employee, she was a symbol. She was a walking, talking testament to the fact that Robyn's time, Robyn's stress, and Robyn's household were valued more than anyone else's. The other wives were expected to be self-sufficient, to rely on each other and their older children, the very system of plural marriage they had built. Robyn, on the other hand, was allowed to opt out and hire outside help. This single decision exposed the hypocrisy at the heart of their financial arrangement. The family pot was for shared sacrifice, but it seemed the sacrifices were not being shared equally. This pattern of privileged spending extends far beyond childcare. Think back to the early seasons, the infamous Victoria's Secret shopping trip. While presented as a risque joke, it was an early sign of Kody's willingness to lavish resources on his new bride in a way he hadn't with the others. Consider Robyn's consistent desire for high-end rental properties, always pushing for more space, more features, more expense, even when the family's finances were in jeopardy. Her tears over the possibility of having to buy a home instead of renting a mansion felt profoundly out of touch to viewers, and one can only imagine to the other wives. This wasn't the behavior of a partner in a financially struggling family. This was the behavior of someone who knows with certainty that their personal cash flow is secure, regardless of the family's overall financial health. She was spending from the executive account, while the others were trying to balance the books with their stipends. And what about the man who holds the keys to the kingdom? Kody's self-image is critical to understanding this financial war. He doesn't see himself as a husband in a partnership of equals. He has repeatedly referred to himself as the president of the family, the CEO. He speaks not of love and collaboration, but of leadership, loyalty, and obedience. His infamous whiteboard presentation at Coyote Pass, where he dictated the rules of family engagement, looked less like a family meeting and more like a hostile corporate restructuring. When the wives pushed back, he wasn't hurt like a husband. He was incensed like a CEO whose board of directors was staging a coup. This corporate mindset explains his approach to money. As president, he believed he had the right to make unilateral decisions with the company's funds. We saw it with My Sisterwife's Closet, a venture that benefited Robyn primarily but was funded by all. What about his other ventures? For a time, Kody was involved in a business selling guns and sporting equipment. Where did the startup capital for that come from? Was there a family vote? Was it drawn from the Central LLC? Like so many of the Brown family's financial dealings, it's shrouded in mystery, another example of Kody pursuing his own interests, likely with collective funds, while expecting the wives to focus solely on their contribution to the central pot. His frustration with the wives wasn't just about their lack of respect, it was about their growing financial independence. Their MLM businesses, Mary's Inn, these were rogue divisions operating outside of his corporate control. They were a threat to his authority as the sole gatekeeper of the family's wealth. Now let's introduce the most explosive part of this theory. Kody's draconian COVID-19 protocols were not primarily about health. They were a weapon of financial control. This is the insider theory that changes everything. The rules themselves were nonsensical and hypocritical, with Kody and Robyn moving freely between their home and the nannies, while forbidding Janelle's sons from seeing their girlfriends. But look at who the rules punished most severely: Janelle and Christine. They were the heads of households with adult or near-adult children who had jobs, social lives, and a growing sense of independence. Kody's ultimatum, follow my rules or I don't come over, was also a financial threat. By declaring their households non-compliant, he could effectively excommunicate them from the central family unit. And if you're not part of the unit, why should you get a full share of the unit's resources? The pandemic provided Kody with the perfect excuse to formalize the financial separation that was already happening in secret. It was a loyalty test with a financial reward. Obey him, isolate yourself from your own children, and remain in his good graces. And perhaps the money keeps flowing. Defy him, choose your children, and you're cut off. He used a public health crisis to consolidate his power and his finances around his chosen family, Robyn and her children. He wasn't just emotionally abandoning his other families, he was, allegedly, financially starving them out, forcing them into a position where they would have to rely solely on their own side hustles to survive. It was the ultimate power play of a corporate tyrant, using a crisis to purge the company of disloyal employees. And the victims of this war were not just the wives, they were the children. The disparity in how the Brown children were treated financially is perhaps the most heartbreaking evidence of all. For years, fans have pointed out the stark differences. When Robyn's son, Dayton, had an ATV accident, his recovery and needs were a central plot point, a family crisis that required everyone's focus and, presumably, resources. He was set up in his own wing of the family home, given every comfort. Yet, when Christine's daughter Ysabel needed life-altering surgery for her scoliosis, it was presented as Christine's problem to solve. Christine had to fundraise, crowdfund through her MLM business, and ultimately travel across the country with her daughter to get the surgery done alone during a pandemic because Kody refused to go. Where was the president of Kody Brown Family Entertainment, LLC, then? Where was the family pot that was supposed to provide for the health and well-being of all his children? The unavoidable conclusion is that the pot was reserved for a select few. The contrast couldn't be more stark or more cruel. The theory suggests that resources were allocated based on which mother was in favor, meaning children were treated as extensions of their mother's standing with Kody. Robyn's children were the children of the favored wife, the co-CEO, and thus were afforded every advantage. The children of Mary, Janelle, and Christine were the children of the stipend-earning supporting cast, their needs secondary and their futures less secure. This is why the rebellion of the older children is so significant. The public criticism from Peta and Garrison and Gabe is not just teenage angst or family squabbling. It is the cry of a generation of children who grew up watching their mothers be systematically devalued. They are the primary witnesses to this secret paycheck war. They lived it. They saw their mothers working, hustling, sacrificing, only to see the family's resources flow towards one house, one wife, and one set of siblings. When Gabriel tearfully recounted how his own father forgot his birthday, it was about more than a missed phone call. It was the culmination of years of feeling like his father's time, attention, and resources were being reallocated elsewhere. Kody wasn't just emotionally absent, he had financially and emotionally divested from his other families. The children's anger is the righteous anger of those who have seen an injustice up close. They are the whistleblowers of the Brown family corporation. To truly grasp the depth of the betrayal, we have to look at the legal and corporate structure Kody built. The decision to divorce Mary and legally marry Robyn was presented to the world as a noble sacrifice, a way to adopt Robyn's children and make them legally Browns. It was a beautiful story, a selfless act of a patriarch, but view it through the lens of a corporate takeover and it becomes something far more sinister. It was the single most brilliant and ruthless financial move Kody ever made. By marrying Robyn, he didn't just make her a wife, he made her his legal next of kin. He made her the primary legal beneficiary of the entire Kody Brown family entertainment empire. In that one move, Mary, his first wife of over 2 decades, the woman who helped build the family from the ground up, was legally relegated to the status of a spiritual associate and independent contractor. Janelle and Christine were in the same boat. In the eyes of the law, Kody Brown had one wife, Robyn. If Kody were to die, who would inherit his assets, his share of the LLC, his producer's royalties? The legal wife. Who would control the family's intellectual property, their life rights for future shows or books? The legal wife. The divorce and remarriage wasn't just about adoption. It was a succession plan. It ensured that in any future scenario, death, divorce from the others, or the end of the show, the assets and power would be consolidated with Robyn. It was the ultimate betrayal, stripping the original 3 wives of any legal claim to the empire they had helped build, all under the guise of family unity. This legal maneuvering extends to the physical assets as well. Look at the deeds for Coyote Pass. The ownership of the land is a tangled mess, but a consistent theme emerges. The parcels are primarily in Kody's name or Kody and Robyn's names jointly. The other wives had to fight to have their names included, and even then, their ownership was precarious, tied to their relationship with Kody. In a corporation, the person whose name is on the deed holds the power. By controlling the land ownership, Kody maintained ultimate control. He could, in theory, sell the land out from under them. Christine's decision to sell her plot back to Kody and Robyn upon leaving was her only move. She couldn't just take her land with her, she had to liquidate her asset and get out. A final, painful acknowledgement that she was never a true partner, just a stakeholder in a company that had long since devalued her shares. And what about the network? Is TLC just a passive documentarian in all of this? Not a chance. The network isn't just complicit. It's an active participant in creating this financial hierarchy. A television network is a business, and its goal is to maximize profit. They identified the Kody and Robyn drama as the show's primary ratings driver. Therefore, they built the show's narrative around them. The edit, the promotion, the story arcs, everything began to center on Robyn's integration, her struggles, her children, and her romantic relationship with Kody. In doing so, TLC created the justification for a pay discrepancy. They weren't paying for a family of 18, they were paying for 2 stars and their supporting cast. And here is the smoking gun that elevates this from a compelling theory to a near certainty. Check the show's credits. Kody Brown is listed as an executive producer. Robyn, according to some reports, has also held a producer credit at various times. The other wives, they are listed as cast. In the television industry, this distinction is everything. A producer credit is not just a vanity title. It comes with a separate contract and a separate, significantly higher paycheck. It signifies a level of creative and financial control that a mere cast member does not have. This is it. This is the mechanism for the 2-tiered pay system. It's written right there in the credits. Kody and Robyn weren't just getting a bigger slice of the family pot from the LLC. They were likely receiving entirely separate paychecks directly from the production company for their roles as producers, money that the other wives may not have even known existed. This producer's salary could easily be double or triple what a cast member makes. It's the money that pays for the mansion, the nanny, the expensive toys, and the designer clutter. It is the secret paycheck. So where does that leave them now? The secret war is over. The rebellion was a success. Christine, Janelle, and Mary have emancipated themselves. They are no longer employees of Kody Brown Family Entertainment, LLC. They are their own corporations. Christine has her TLC money from her own show, her social media influence, and a new husband. Janelle is a powerful social media influencer and brand ambassador, living life on her own terms. Mary is the queen of a LuLaRoe empire and the proprietor of a successful business. her beloved inn. They are thriving. They have taken their audiences, their goodwill, and their earning potential with them. Meanwhile, what is left of the original corporation, a CEO and his VP, rattling around in a mansion they are reportedly struggling to afford, the show's premise is gone. The TLC paycheck, if it continues, will undoubtedly be slashed, as they are now just a show about a monogamous couple with a complicated past. The combined earning power of 5 adults, which funded their lavish lifestyle for a decade, is gone. 3 of the company's most valuable assets have walked out the door, and they've started wildly successful competing businesses. The empire is crumbling, the money is running out. The great irony is that the unequal system Kody and Robyn allegedly created to secure their own financial future has ultimately led to its potential ruin. They won the secret paycheck war, but in doing so, they lost the kingdom. The cliffhanger is no longer just about a television show. It's about a financial apocalypse in real time. The next season of Sisterwives might not be a story of plural marriage at all. It might just be the prequel to a bankruptcy filing.